Welcome to another exciting episode of Let's Talk. I'm your host, Winny Vee, and in this episode, I have a special guest with me who needs no introduction to the podcasting community, but to those that aren't familiar with podcasters or what you would call alternative sports journalism or media, I'm with the master podcaster himself, Nathan Durkin, aka Rugby League Guru. Now, Nathan is a seasoned podcast host and producer with a passion for creating engaging and informative content in relation to the beautiful game that is rugby league. Now, aside from his own podcast, Rugby League Guru, he's also 1/4 of the well-received and highly popular Bloke In A Bar podcast. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn more about Nathan's life journey, experiences, and achievements on Let's Talk with Winny Vee. Hey, bro, how are you?
I'm good, mate. What an introduction.
Thanks. It took me a while to come up with that, but thanks for that. Now, Nathan, what do I call you, man? Do I call you Guru? Do I call you Nathan?
Please, for the love of God, call me Nathan. There is nothing more cringy to me than when I'm just talking to, blokes that I get along with, whatever, and they call me Guru. It's a lot,
Yeah. I do want to ask though, with Guru, was that a nickname that you always had as a kid, or was it something that came along with your podcast?
No, mate, definitely came along. It actually came along before the podcast. It's a funny story, actually. My mates, we take our super coach very, very seriously, and we plan a draft competition. And the boys decided one year we'd give NFL a go. And I think to my mates, I came across like I knew a lot about the NFL. All I knew was my Pittsburgh Steelers and nothing else. So I joined this NFL fantasy comp. It was a draft, and I got to about 2 days before draft day and thought, and had a look at all the players and thought, I know none of these guys outside of Ben Roethlisberger and a couple of Steelers. I know nothing. So I jumped on Twitter. I'd never even thought about it before. I'd played Supercoach and everything, but never thought about it. And I just found a guy on Twitter to give advice on our NFL draft, and he was called the Fantasy Guru. And mate, I honestly, I did not make an educated decision on my own the entire year. I went off everything this bloke said, and I think I came second or something. I didn't win it, but I should have come dead last for what I knew. And this guy got me through the whole year. And off the back of that, I sort of thought, maybe like no one's doing this for Supercoach. There was a couple of people out there, but they hadn't gained a big following yet, and I hadn't heard of them or anything yet. So I thought, I might as well give this a go. And it actually started. I was originally Supercoach Guru, and I made it trying to, trick some of the boys into asking me questions. And then when we're all away on the beers on draft weekend, just get it up and say, oh, this bloke asked this bloke this, which was all good and well. It was a great plan. I had one of the boys, hook, line, and sinker, he'd asked me a heap of questions. I was ready to spring it on him. And then the night before draft night, we both got wasted, and I ruined the surprise there. But, mate, it's crazy to think back where it started, literally trying to G up a couple of mates, to now being a full-time job. It's honestly unbelievable.
No, that's awesome. I love that, bro. And it's funny because I'm big in NFL fantasy, and I have a friend who, he was a newbie when he joined us, and we've been doing it for about 11 odd years now. And he's a 49ers fan. So when he first joined, he selected all 49ers plays, and we just sat there and let him do it. So I know what you mean there, not knowing at first what it's all about, but that's really cool. Now, Nathan, I just want to take it all the way back to your childhood, bro. And we'll start with where you grew up and what your childhood was like.
Yeah, mate, I had a great childhood, to be honest. It was unreal. I lived in sort of South Sydney sort of area, bounced around a few houses and whatnot, but had a great childhood, mate. Had a great group of mates. My mum did everything she possibly could for me to give me the best possible life I could. I wish I probably had a more interesting story for you, to be honest with you, mate. But I was very lucky. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. So yeah, grew up in South Sydney, mate. Played footy, not very well, but played a heap of footy. Absolutely loved it growing up. And yeah, mate, I honestly I couldn't find a complaint about my childhood if I tried.
Oh man, that's great. I might as well ask, you played footy as a kid. Who was your footy team? What footy team did you support?
Mate, to be honest with you, and people find it bizarre, but I've never really been like a follow a team sort of guy. I've always been very much so like I follow favorite players. And it's funny, you know, and all my mates that I went to high school with, they all give me so much crap about this. But, you know, growing up, I was living in Sydney. Funny story, when the Sydney football stadium was built in, I think it was 1988, they offered a membership. And back then it was about $800 a year, which then was astronomical. It was just ridiculous because all it was a stadium. There was no gym. There was nothing attached. It was just $800 to be able to go to the footy. And I remember, well, I wasn't alive at that point, but my old man brought a pass for it. And all of his mates said, "You're crazy. What are you doing? You're off your head. It's too much money." Well, as it turns out, an SFS membership, whatever you sign up for on the day to pay, you pay that forever.
Wow.
So in 2023, we've got an SFS membership for $800. If you want to sign up for an SFS membership right now, like the one we've got, you're looking at about 17K. So it's and you're on a waiting list. So I was very lucky in that regard, mate. That growing up, the Sydney Football Stadium, I had a members pass that I could go whenever I wanted. So obviously, I grew up a lot watching the Chooks there, watching Brad Fittler. So he's always going to be my favourite player of all time. Then the Bunnies came back into the comps. I got to see a bit of South Sydney, but that was pretty boring in the early years, as you know, mate. That was a tough little gig to watch. But it's funny, like I cheered for Brad Fittler, absolutely loved him, loved everything about him. And then because I'd always be at the Roosters games and I'd go there for the Jersey Flag, the Premier League, the whole thing, I'd be there all day. And so I started to watch their New South Wales Cup team quite a bit. And they had a guy on their team who was just smaller than everyone else, but he just hung in every game. He used to kick field goals and goals from all over the place. And he sort of became my favourite player in that team. And then he went to the Dragons. His name was Jamie Soward.
Yeah.
So I watched him come through. So then when Freddie retired, that was about the time that Sowie came in for the Roosters. Then he went to the Dragons. So all my mates sort of give me shit that, you know, I went for the Roosters. I was actually just cheering on Brad Fittler. Then I went to sort of cheering on the Dragons just to follow Jamie Soward. And it was funny, of course, when we were in year 12, that was 2010, Roosters versus Dragons in the grand final. And all my mates are Chooks fans pretty much. So it was great to see Sowie get one over them in that game. But mate, I never really followed a team. I always followed players. And now as I'm getting older, mate, honestly, I follow my super coach players. That's who I follow essentially. So it's worked out well that I'm not, I don't believe anyway that I'm biased towards any team or against any team, which is, you know, in a strange way worked out perfectly for what my jobs ended up being.
Yeah, that's so true, man. And it's funny that you're a fan of Fittler because I'm a big fan of Fittler as well. I'm a Penrith fan. I'm a diehard Penrith fan. But even when he left Penrith and went to the Chooks, I was still, you know, discreetly cheering him on.
Yeah.
I think he's one of the best, especially with what he accomplished at such a young age. New South Wales, Premiership, Origin. And I think he may have still been a teenager back then. Possibly.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. So that's awesome, man, that we have a bloke that we really cheer for. Now, I just wanted to ask about your family dynamic. Are you a only child or do you have brothers and sisters?
Mate, I am an only child. My parents split up when I was about 5 or 6 or so, and then my old man remarried, and now he's got 2 younger boys. So I've got 2 half brothers. So I don't consider myself an only child because I consider them my brothers essentially. They're both teenagers, so they're both my oldest Josh. He's 18, so they're both 12 or 15 years younger than me, which has been cool in some respects. I've got to watch them, come through and play footy and help them out throughout that. And it's I've always been at an age where I've been able to appreciate watching them grow and develop and everything. So yeah, I wouldn't say I'm an only child. I've got two brothers, but it is a little bit. I'm probably more of almost a uncle to them
Yeah.
than a brother, which I love, to be honest with you. I avoided all the dribble of all the fights and all the arguments and everything like that, and I just get to enjoy the good bits for the most part.
No, that's I love that, man. Now, Nathan, seeing as you spent a lot of time at the footy as a kid, are there any memories that footy memories as a kid that you cherish? Were there any good footy games that you were able to watch live that you'll never forget?
Yeah, mate, a heap. I was very lucky as a kid. Obviously, I got to be there for so many moments at the SFS. They're unbelievable. I was there the day, I think it was the Kangaroos beat the Kiwis in the Tri Nations final, and Darren Lockyer scored in extra time. I was there for that whole game. That was unreal. So many memories of the SFS, but I also, as I said, I lived with my mum growing up, and me and my dad for, my entire childhood, we always had a thing that we'd always go to grand final day. And essentially outside of, since I've started doing Guru, because I just need to sit home and watch the game, I think I missed two grand finals in 20 years.
Wow.
So some of those moments from those grand finals, like all the great moments. I was there when Scott Sattler made his tackle.
Yeah.
Bro, I remember there was one year we got last minute tickets to the Tigers Cowboys game, and we're sort of in a weird spot. We were like on the corner post and up in the air. And I'd never sat there before, and I don't know if you've been to that stadium, but there's not many good seats there, and these weren't great realistically. But you're at the grand final, be unreal, and I'll just never forget when Benji Marshall went through and he came off his right foot to throw the flick. His torso was facing directly to us. I think we were on the best possible angle for that play. 2015, never forget. I was directly. Like there was a direct line between my eyesight, Thurston, and the post when he took the shot from the sideline. And, you see on that tape, as the ball's in the air, Thurston sort of starts to throw his hands in the air. Bro, I would have put my house on that thing was going over in the air. It never looked like it was missing. I couldn't believe it when it hit the posts. So yeah, mate, and like I think a big one for me, like I'm not a South Sydney Rabbitohs fan, but growing up in South Sydney and watching them win that grand final, ending that drought, it's that was, I've never heard a noise like that before, especially when GI scored that try at the end. So it's hard to narrow it down to a single moment, mate, because I was so lucky to be there for so many. But the guy that we mentioned before, Brad Fittler, I was there the night in State of Origin where he charged the ball down.
Yeah.
And regathered and scored. And I'll tell you a story about that. That was, so that year, the major sponsor was Wizard Home Loans, right? Mark Boris, who, of course, incredibly successful, Mark, on the board at the Chooks and whatnot. And it's a small world. I was actually going to school with his young bloke. His young bloke was a loose cannon. Anyway, I go out to that game on the Wednesday night. Thursday afternoon is when we had our footy training, and it had rained that day, and we showed up. Training was one of those, afternoon sessions when it's rained and there's mud everywhere and it's going to be unreal. And my dad was the coach, and I'll never forget, I'm standing there and this James kid shows up late and he's behind me. And I just hear my dad go, "You're kidding, take it off." And I turn around. He was wearing Brad Fittler's jersey from the night before.
Wow.
Such footy. So he'd snaked it from his old man. And then about 2 years ago, I had Mark Boris on the podcast and I told him that story, and off mic he goes, "Mate, I've been looking for that jersey for 25 years. I've got no idea where it is." No idea. So crazy how that sort of played out. That's like the greatest moment in my, experiences with league. And then he is showing up to training the next day, ready to dive in mud in like just a 1 in a million jersey,
Yeah, what a story. And that's something you couldn't make that up. That's crazy. Now, Nathan, I just wanted to ask, prior to podcasting, what were you doing work-wise?
Mate, I was actually a teacher. I finished high school, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, to be honest with you. And I'm sort of my little brother's sort of at that point. He finished high school last year, and he's not quite sure what he wants to do. And I ended up in teaching at 18, 19. Is that what I wanted to do? I don't know, to be honest with you. I think there's so many guys out there at that age, and I'm watching it with my brother and his mates, that everyone just expects you at 18 to have your entire life sorted out.
Yep.
And it's just, and like you've got kids that'll be at that age soon. And I just find it so puzzling why 18-year-old kids who a week ago, they weren't allowed to drink alcohol, but they have to have their life sorted out right now. They have to know what they want to do. It blows me away. And I ended up in teaching, and I was very lucky. Once I got into it, I worked in the industry and everything, and I did genuinely absolutely love it for a couple of years, and then it's just it's brutal, mate. You just get worked to the bone, and there's just always a problem. There's always something going on, and so I was a teacher for a couple of years. I loved it, mate. I was a primary school teacher. So I was always sort of year 5, year 6. I'd always end up with the troublesome students and all that, which I loved. I absolutely loved that because they all played footy and I got along with them like a house on fire, you know. So that was always good. But mate, respect to teachers. I can't. Even now, even though I'm not doing it, when I hear people say, "Oh, they get so many holidays," it's like you get no holidays. You're working the entire time. I've got so much respect for all teachers out there, and I believe you said pre-podcast that your wife is kind of in that industry, so she'd know all about it.
Yeah, she does. She says the teachers have it hard, especially when it comes to things like being paid on time, just simple things that, every other 9 to 5 person is accustomed to, like clockwork. You get your pay on this day and so forth. So yeah, she said they do a lot, and there's a lot of challenges, which I did want to follow up with on that question. What were the challenges you experienced as a teacher, and what were some of the achievements you experienced as well?
Honestly, mate, probably the biggest thing that I struggled with, and I still struggle with it today, like the organisation you need to be a teacher is just unbelievable. Like I was just winging it 90% of the time, but I had a good relationship with the kids, so I was sort of able to get away with it to some extent. But like when I see teachers that come in and I can see that they're not going to be able to build a good rapport with students, I'm like, good God, you'd want to be organised, or you are in for a tough trot here. So, mate, I was very lucky on that front. But organisation, like just the amount, like people think you come in at 9, you go at 3, like. If you're fair income, like you're arriving there at 7:30, and we used to have, like Oztag or touch 5:30 in the arvo, and like it'd just be touch and go whether I'd make it or not, honestly, because there's always just something to do. There's something that you need to sort out. It's constant. And look, the only 2 jobs I've ever had has been a teacher and doing whatever the hell you want to call this. So like I don't have a heap of experience in other roles or whatever, but I just think teachers, they work so hard and they're not getting paid anywhere near enough. So organisation was always a huge thing for me, mate. That was always tough. As far as achievements, I was never like an award-winning teacher or anything like that. To be perfectly honest with you, I think a lot of teachers I worked with probably didn't appreciate the way that I taught because I wasn't organised, but they knew that the relationships that I'd build with kids was just second to none. And like there'd be situations where, there'd be young blokes. Like I worked at a school in South Sydney that had a very high Indigenous rate of kids.
Yep.
And mate, I love that. They all played footy. They all it was just unreal. And they were, I don't know, it was just so refreshing to be able to treat these kids differently to what they probably have been treated before. And like, it just made such a difference. And I think because I did things a little bit unorthodox sometimes, I think it'd rub teachers up the wrong way and stuff, which I get 100%. But I think like just little things, little differences that I'd make to, kids' lives that have probably gone kinder to year 5, just in the too hard basket. I mean, just too hard to deal with. And like we've all grown up with that mate that was just always such a punish as a kid. But when they find the right teacher, it can turn around very, very quickly. So some of those ones, mate, I've had kids that have arrived to my class that are like anxiety ridden, that couldn't walk in the door. Kids that I had a boy arrive one year that was a complete mute when he arrived at my class, and he'd been from kinder to year 5. And I think halfway through the year, I had him talking. So that was like a huge huge thing, So, yeah, like there's teachers that I look back on from my schooling that I think, fuck, like they made a difference to me at that point in my life. And I'd like to think that there's a number of kids out there that would feel the same about me,
Yeah, yeah. Especially if PE was the subject all day with your teaching style, man. But
Well, mate, I'll tell you what, in my last year of teaching, the sports job opened up and I went, oh, how good's this? I'm going to go do sports. This is going to be unreal. And it's great when you've got the year 5 and year 6 kids, but when you're spending, 8 hours a day out in a boiling hot field with 35-year-olds, very different kettle of fish. So I worked that out very, very quickly. I'd been looking at the PE teacher for years, and that's where I need to be. That'd be unreal. And then I got there and went, good God, this is the hardest thing I've ever done.
It's so funny, bro, because you were talking about organization, and I was actually going to ask, well, I'm going to ask now, what skills did you take as a teacher into podcasting? And I thought organization or organizing your content and stuff like that would be coming from your teaching background.
Yeah, mate, and I think I definitely have improved it. And to be fair, there's a lot less to organize. I have a basic sort of structure for every day, how it's going to look. But I also, I don't know, it might sound strange, but I also enjoy being a little bit more unstructured. And that's sort of been my whole podcast. Like when I got into podcasting, every single podcast that I'd know of was a half an hour show or an hour show once a week. And I just got in and I thought, why? Why do I have to do it like that? Why why not just have smaller podcasts every single day, touch on that specific topic, and why not say what needs to be said in 6 minutes instead of dragging it out for 25 minutes and just repeating yourself and just chucking in filler stuff that doesn't need to be said. So it's funny, like I've got a podcast agency that I've been with for years, and when I signed with them, they were saying to me, what do you put out a 4-minute podcast yesterday? Why? And I went, I didn't have anything more to say. That was what had to be said. Why would I say any more than that? And they razzed me for like a year saying it's stupid. It's not going to work. And, now they've got me giving advice to other people about different ways to think about podcasting and different ways to do it. And, that's probably something I'm pretty proud of in podcasting, that I came in and I didn't try and just do what everyone else did.
Yeah.
Try to put my own sort of spin on it. And it's worked out really well for me, mate. Like people almost fall off their chairs when I say I put out, 5 to 6 podcasts a day, but I mean, that's my job. It's my job at the end of the day. And if there's something to talk about, I'll jump behind the mic. I'll talk about it. And as I just said, if it takes 3 minutes, so be it.
Yeah, just don't beat around the bush. I just want to ask Nathan, were you podcasting when you were teaching, or was there a break period and then you got it, like you finished teaching and said, I'm done with this. What am I going to do now?
Mate, I had the social media page when I was teaching. I was still doing that. So I hadn't revealed my face or anything yet. And like, there'd be times where I'd be in the schoolyard and I'd hear the year 6 kids talking about the Guru or their Supercoach team. And I sort of sit there and giggle. And there was even times where like I was on afternoon duty once and there was 2 fathers next to me and they were talking about their Supercoach team. And I remember one of them was saying, oh, the Guru guy said this. And the other bloke said, oh, he's a flog. Don't listen to him. And I was standing right there just thinking, oh, this is unreal. This is great. So I started off like that, but no one knew it was me. No one had any idea at school or anything like that. I pretty much didn't tell anyone. Like, it was my girlfriend knew about it. Some of my mates knew about it. That was about it. And then I didn't have the podcast yet. And it's a funny story. If you're a American sports person out there, you'll know Colin Cowherd.
Yep.
He's one of the commentators over there. And I used to really like his podcast, except I didn't know what a podcast was at the end of 2019. Never heard of it, right? And I remember I said to one of my mates, I was talking about some Tom Brady stat or something. And he's like, oh, where'd you hear that? And I said, oh, I've been watching these little 5-minute clips on Facebook.
From the herd.
Yeah, bro. So like my school was a 15-minute drive from home. Every day Colin would put out 3 5-minute clips.
Yeah.
So I just load them up, turn my phone on in the car and drive and just listen to those 3 things. And my mate said, you can listen to the whole thing on his podcast, right? And I literally said, what's a podcast? That would have been in September 2019. Didn't buy any of the equipment yet. We went on a cruise at the end of the year, big family cruise, and I told the school that I was working at that I wasn't coming back, that I was going to have a go at this thing, and fuck, I got some laughs, bro. Good God, did I get some laughs? So it's bittersweet now from a heap of people that I wasn't really huge fans of. But yeah, so we went on this cruise, and I still remember I got back into Sydney Harbour, and like when I set foot on land, I was like, fuck, I got to start this podcast. I got to try and turn this into a career now, which was just wild to think about. Like, and I'll be honest with you, I wasn't even confident that I could do it at that point. Wasn't confident at all. And I remember when I first started, I interviewed Brett White, old Canberra Raiders front rower. I think he's at the Gold Coast Titans now as assistant coach, champion fella, unreal guy. And I spoke to him, and like I was so nervous. I listen back to it now, and I get about 3 minutes into it. I go, I can't listen to this anymore. This is so cringy to hear. But I remember at the time thinking, oh my God, that interview, that went gangbusters. So many people tuned into that. I went back through my stats the other day, and I went back to that podcast. That podcast received about 5% of the listens that I get on a podcast now.
Wow.
And I remember back then going, oh my God, so many people are listening to this thing. It's unbelievable. So, yeah, mate, as far as you as your question went, I didn't have the podcast when I was teaching. I started doing that after. I still didn't reveal my face just yet. And then actually when I did reveal my face, I was sort of part-time teaching at a school. Yeah. Just for like 2 days a week. That's when I was doing the sports teaching, and there was a couple of the older kids that sort of started to piece it together. And I actually got away with it for about 3 months. I said that it was my twin brother, and some of them actually brought it. So I snuck away for it for a little bit, but then Bloke In A Bar came along, and once I was on there, I was like, okay, I probably got to pull back on the teaching now and have a real crack at this. So. Yeah, it's wild to look back on that. But yeah, September 2019, I didn't know what a podcast was. January 2020, I made it my career. So crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy. And that's where it wasn't actually Bloke In A Bar where I'd first seen you. I'd seen you on a YKTR podcast with Ice. And that's where I started following you. I was like, man, I love this guy's content and his take on the footy. And it's really funny. I'd actually spoken with one of my cousins earlier today, and I was just talking to him and asked him, hey, man, if you had a footy question for someone who works in footy media, what would you ask him? Because, man, I was shitting bricks earlier today. And he said, oh, I wouldn't really know. And I said, well, I'm going to sit down with Guru. And he goes, no way. Swear you're sitting down with him. I said, yeah, I'm just going to try this podcast thing with him. And have a yarn, and he goes, bro, let that guy know that I'm a diehard rugby union fan. And when I listen to his content and the way he breaks it down for me, so when I start watching league, I understand it better. So that's a little plug for you there, Tangi. But yeah, that's what he was telling me. He goes, bro, I love that guy and I love his stuff. And he helps me understand the game a bit better with his takes on the NRL. From a rugby union fan's perspective. But that's when I'd first seen you, bro. I'd seen you on YKTR, and I was like, who's this guy? Where's this guy come from? So I started following your content. But so you had so for those that don't know, Supercoach and NRL Fantasy are footy games that people can play where they choose a team made up of current footy players. And based on what these players do, whether it's tackles, making, scoring a try, kicking a field goal, they get points rewarded on their effort out on the field. And then you tally all your points up and you face off against another person in your competition. And that's pretty much the gist of fantasy football. So with your fantasy competition, you had started that first with a bunch of mates, and then you went into podcasting from the fantasy. So fantasy football, you started making content. Is that what the podcast started off as, content for fantasy or Supercoach fantasy?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I started, as I said, as Supercoach Guru, as you just said, making fantasy content and all that. And then I've been very lucky, mate. One of my best mates, I went to high school with him, and we weren't even that close at high school. We're sort of in the same sort of group, but we became really good mates after high school, and you'll understand why in a minute. And he was like the starting New South Wales outside centre in Union, but then he'd be the starter, the opening bowler for New South Wales in cricket. He was in the Australian squad for javelin, so he could just do it all. This guy, right? And so we were mates growing up and whatnot, but not overly close. And then we finished school, and I sort of had a touch in an Oztag team that I used to organise and run with mates, and he played with us occasionally. And I never really knew too much about what he was doing in life or whatever. And then, about 5 or 6 years ago, I sort of having a beer with him or something one day, and he just told me about what he was doing. And essentially, without us even knowing, he'd built this company through social media that was like like an interior design sort of page, I guess you'd call it. And I remember him showing it to me in the early days and just thinking, what the fuck are you doing? Like you're sharing pictures of chairs, you're sharing pictures, like all this weird stuff that I've never heard you talk about. And yeah, I won't say too much because he's a very humble guy, but he's now got 1 million followers on his page. He's got about 45 people working underneath him, and he actually had to ring me last night. I've got my wedding coming up in April, and he was so upset. He said, "Bro, I can't make it to the wedding." And I went, "Oh," I'm thinking, "Oh, that's a bit shit," And I thought, "Well, why?" And he goes, "Oh, we're actually I'm expanding the business to America."
Wow.
And I just thought, wow, that is unbelievable. That's crazy. And if it wasn't for him, I don't know where I'd be, because 2 or 3 years ago, probably 4 years ago now, I was making this Supercoach content, and I got to about 15,000 followers really quickly. Did it in about 8 months or so. It just took off all of a sudden. And as I said, there was other people doing it, but I just think I hit a bit of a blank spot as far as social media, the way that my designs were, and all that sort of stuff. So I hit 15,000 really easily. And he said to me, he's like, "Oh, you should start to talk more rugby league. Still do your super coach, but talk more rugby league." And I sort of went, "Oh, I've got to stay in my lane. I've got to keep doing what I'm doing." And thank God I took his advice, because he said to me that day, he said, if you move to rugby league content and you make your audience wider, he goes, you'll be doing this full time in 4 years' time. And unbelievably, I was doing it full time in 3 years' time. And at that point, like Kempy at Bloke In A Bar, he'd been grinding at what he was doing for 3 or 4, 5 years at that point. And, he was only just starting to go full time. And now I know, looking back on it from being mates with Kempy now, that he was scraping at that point, scraping to get by. My mate said, "Yeah, if you change to rugby league, you do this, you'll be full time very soon." And it's crazy. I've been so lucky to have a mind like his in my corner, because, mate, everything he has said would happen has played out just about perfectly. It's been unbelievable. And yeah, to be able to see the success that he's had and literally just guide me through everything that I've been doing. Like I rang him a few months ago and I said, "Hey, 2023, I want to make a big push for YouTube content." And he went, "Sweet, come into my office." And I went into his office for about 8 hours, and he just took me through everything YouTube, all this algorithm sort of stuff, all this stuff that it was just another world to me,
Yeah.
And it sounded like really basic stuff, but like ever since then, like my YouTube is still growing. But for the entire last year, I think I gained 2,000 subscribers. In the last 3 months, I've pretty much gained 3,000, and it's been rugby league off season as well. So guys that are successful, guys that know what they're doing, and that's where I've been very lucky to have him. I've been very lucky to have Kempy as well, who's taught me so much. Kempy teach me. He honestly teaches me something new every day without even trying. Maybe he's trying to teach me. I don't know, but it just feels like he does it naturally, Kempy. So I've actually completely forgotten what the original question was, but I have been.
That's all good, bro.
I've been incredibly lucky with the people around me, mate, for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Having someone like that, and that's what I've tried to find so far. Because like you, not knowing how to do those things like YouTube and that, like we were talking about earlier off here, video content is really big, especially for podcasts now compared to just audio, which I'm currently doing. But we'll get into that later. I just wanted to ask, well, you mentioned Kempy, Denon Kemp, the host of the successful Bloke In A Bar podcast. How did that all come about, bro? How did you get in contact, or how did you guys get in contact? Sorry, and how did you end up on the show?
It's funny, man. Before I was making my own content, like I honestly, I never really took any notice of rugby league content. So I had no idea that what Kempy was doing. I had no idea what NRL Roast was doing. No idea who Clarkey was. If you would have said those names to me 5 years ago, I wouldn't have had the slightest clue what you were talking about. It just wasn't, social media wasn't a rugby league thing for me. It was just friends and family and whatnot, which is so weird to think back on now. So I just entered this world completely blind. And, I used to see Kempy's, content pop up here and there. And it was funny, before I ever met him, mate, like I remember one night we had a massive fucking stink on social media.
Wow.
Like,
you and Kempy?
Yeah, bro, 100%. Well, and like I get it too, because he's he's a former player who's been grinding away for a few years, and then all of a sudden this dickhead appears calling himself the guru, and I'm trying to tell Denon Kemp, a former first grader, who should be playing this position. Anyway, I can't. It was about Sean Johnson, but I can't remember what the context of the argument was. But I just remember sitting there going, "This bloke's a fucking flog. He's full of himself. I can't believe this guy." And he was thinking the same of me, and we had very brief moments of contact over the years, very brief. But I would say early on, we probably weren't huge fans of each other, realistically. And then I don't know what happened. I ended up with his phone number one night and I wanted to ring him. It's funny, just when I'm talking to you, behind you is a light that I brought about 4 years ago, a really nice stage light. And Kempy was the one that sent me the link for it. And we'd never met at this point. And I said to him, "Oh, look, I want to start to do some more video sort of content. I sort of need some stage lights for where I'm doing it." And he sent me this link and we were talking. And I remember that took us about 5 minutes. And then, honestly, I reckon we sat on the phone and spoke for about 2.5 hours, just about life, content, what I was doing, what he had planned. And I don't know, like we got along well and everything. And I thought, maybe that'll lead to something in the future. We'll see. Then I reckon I didn't talk to Kempy for 3 or 4 months. We were just both busy and doing whatever. And then I think Scope from YKTR, Scope got COVID. It was 2 weeks before the 2021 grand final, I think it was. Yeah. Isaac reached out to me and said, "Oh, do you want to come on?" And I was shitting myself, absolutely shitting myself. I'd never done. The only thing I'd ever done before was essentially talking to my phone. I was podcasting at the time, but there was no video content for it or anything. So going into a studio like that on the bright lights and sitting next to Isaac, and like he'll be the first one to tell you, like he was just an average first grade or whatever. But that was the first time I'd ever sat opposite a first grade footballer to talk footy. And it was, it was a crazy moment, just how much sort of respect he was giving my takes and my opinions and all that sort of stuff. And it was funny, when we came on, first episode I did was previewing the Panthers Melbourne Storm prelim final in 2021. And that was the game, the huge upset. The Panthers gave it to them, and it just came from nowhere. I think they were at like $5 or $6, and we spent 30 minutes on this show just talking about how good the Melbourne Storm are and how Penrith are no hope. And I think that day was the last day I ever doubted this Panthers side. So I got that opportunity with Isaac, and to be honest with you, mate, I've never spoken to Kempy about it or anything like that, but I assumed that he probably saw me on there and thought, "Oh, he can handle himself." Then I got an opportunity to come on at the start of the next year, I think, with Kempy. And then, eventually that spot opened up. And, I don't know. It's just all been hunky-dory since. But, yeah, like me and Kempy are good mates now and whatever. But, yeah, like I still remember where I was sitting that night when I was having this fight with this guy going.
That's so funny, bro.
Yeah, it's so weird how it all sort of plays out and how it all ends up. To be fair, I don't reckon Kempy would even remember it. I've never spoken to him about it. I don't reckon he would even remember it. But for me, I was like, "Fuck, is this guy kidding himself? Like he's coming about what's going on here," sort of thing. But yeah, it's wild, just how it's all played out.
Yeah, that is wild, bro. In fact, that's another story. It's too good to be true. But I just wanted to touch. Well, firstly, that Storm Penrith game. That was the one at Suncorp. Hey, that was during COVID season. Yeah, I actually was at that game. My youngest daughter, we had all gone out, all the family, to the footy, and fuck, what a game, bro! What a game! I actually thought Nelson was going to win it for Storm during that game when he came on. Um, but Bloke in a Bar, bro, such a massive success, that podcast, and the following you guys have, it's amazing. And I just wanted to ask and sort of just get a behind the scenes kind of feel. Um, how does it all work? How do you guys come in? Do you guys have meetings about content and what you guys are going to push, especially during the off season? Like that's another thing I wanted to ask. The amount of content you've been pushing during this off seasons, it's unreal, bro. Like where do you guys get those ideas from, and how does it all come about? Especially during the off season for you guys, just whatever's happening in the media. That's just you guys put your take on it and just hey, let's push this out and just record and see how we go.
Yeah, it's tough during the off season, mate. And to be honest with you, this off season has been the hardest because there's not many players getting in trouble.
Well, yeah, we'll touch on that. We'll touch on that.
Like credit to the players, it's been a great off season on that front. But like, there's some days where we come in on a Monday and we've got 10 topics to talk about, and I'm like, geez, in a normal season, I don't know how much we talk about these things, but because and credit to the players, like I mean, we've all been saying it for a long time that they need to get smarter, they need to get wiser. They certainly have, and yeah, it's been a little bit counterproductive for me, to be honest with you, because normally you've got this guy's suspended, this guy's in trouble, who's going to replace him, who's going to do that, blah blah blah. But they've been pretty good this season. But yeah, mate. I mean, like during the regular season, it's and I think that's been the big difference between what me and Kempy and now Tim's obviously joined us as well. But I mean, like I sat there and when Kempy needed a co-host, I knew I'd been on there before, but I was like, oh, you know what, he can reach out to any former player whatsoever, and they'll jump at that. So I didn't really expect it. And so when Kempy did reach out, I honestly think the difference has been that he knows that I'll sit there and I'll watch 8 games. I'll watch all 8 of them. And whatever I think is the most important game to talk about, I'll watch that twice, which it all sounds easy and everything. But, if you, when you've got to fit in 8 games before Monday, 9 a.m., it's a lot. It's harder than what it seems. It's a lot harder than what it seems. Like you've just got to think for 25 weeks, you've got to block out the hours of 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. every single Saturday. Without a doubt, there's no question. Every single Sunday, you've got to block out at 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Your Friday nights are gone and everything. So, especially with my girlfriend and stuff, I've been very lucky that she's been unbelievable. But, there'll be afternoons where we're out on a Sunday with family or whatever, and fuck, I've got to say, I've got to go watch the Tigers and the Titans. Yeah. People are like, are you for real? It's a lot easier now that it's my full-time job. But when I was doing it part-time and I was saying that, people just looking at me going, what are you talking about? You don't have to go and watch that game. You'll be fine without it. But I had that dedication for a long time, and I've still got it now. There's a trial this weekend. I think the Dolphins are playing Ipswich or someone, and it's going to be on a stream on the Queensland Rugby League. So my girlfriend said, "Oh, we go out on Saturday night." I went, I've actually got to watch a trial. Like, I can't. I've got to watch it, or I won't get to watch it, which is crazy. But it's I think it's something that, like, I'm sure we've all sat there. Like, I used to sit there and watch the footy show when I was a kid, and I used to listen to the boys, and they were hilarious. They were great. But when they talk footy, you'd sit there and you go, these blokes haven't watched all these games. Yeah, there's no way they've watched all these games, and I find it unbelievable how many people think that they can come into podcasting or into YouTubing of any sport and not watch every single minute of it and expect to give an expert opinion. It blows my mind. So it's a big thing for me, Kempy, and Tim that we do not miss a game. And if something happens, like if I've got a wedding on a Saturday night, I'll have my alarm set for 8 a.m. the next morning to get up and watch those 3 games from the night before, not the highlights, not the KOs, the whole 3 games. Because as good as those KO minis are and everything, you know as well, you can't get a vibe for a game of footy off.
Yeah.
20 minutes. You need to follow the ebbs and the flows of the game and everything to be able to talk about it. So as much as I love it takes up a lot of time.
Yeah, it must do, bro. Well, actually, it does, and that's that dedication, bro. That's you grinding, and you're eating the fruits of your labor. I did want to ask though, talking about dedication, for those that are looking into podcasting, is there any advice you'd like to give them?
Podcasting's hard. Like it's especially harder now. Like it's such a saturated market now. It is very, very hard to come into podcasting now. I mean, it's easier in podcasting to come in if you're a former footballer or you're a former, whatever it might be. But mate, like I came in with none of that.
Yeah,
Absolutely none of it. And that's where you've just got to grind your ass off. You've got to be putting out content constantly. Like I see podcasts out there that they put up a post where they're our 200th podcast, and I just sit there and I'm like, fuck, I'm doing 200 a month. Like I literally am doing 200 a month, and I just think sometimes that, and the application of putting out one podcast a week that's an hour or so, it's been proven to work over time. It's a long grind. You look at the Hello Sport boys. They started. People don't realize like Tom and Eddie started 6 and 7 years ago, doing what they're doing, talking to 30 people for so long. Kempy was exactly the same. I was exactly the same, and it's just that consistency
yeah,
to keep going. Because it's funny when you start to the weird thing podcasts, like you go and watch my stats when I started, Kempy's stats, they all just they're so low, and then all of a sudden they just go bang, and the momentum you pick up off the back of it is just crazy. But you've got to hang in there until you get that moment, and it can be challenging, mate. It can be so disheartening when you record a podcast, you talk to someone for 40-50 minutes, you edit it for an hour or two, and then you put it out and 10 people listen to it. Like,
yeah,
it's so disheartening, but you've got to push through that period. And as I said, mate, my point of difference was that I would have really short, sharp
yeah, yeah,
pods. They'd be really quick. And mate, I've had wives that have messaged me and said, "You've saved my marriage because we are constantly fighting over little chores like doing the washing up, taking the garbage out. And now for my husband, when he needs to do the washing up, I put on a Guru podcast that goes for 5 minutes and go, see if you can get it done before this finishes."
that's
Just little, and it's just like you don't even consider how it impacts people's lives.
yeah, yeah. I know what you mean, man. Because hey, I'm in that boat as well. Like I'll do my chores, whether it's out in the yard, and I've thrown on a podcast, whether it's just,
Yep.
it's a bit of music and it's a bit of podcasts. So yeah, that's awesome advice, bro. Just grinding, and it's funny you brought up the Hello Sport boys because man, I swear I've subscribed to their channel and get all their notifications as well. And I think I saw like 450th podcast episode. So you want to talk about grinding? Those boys really know what a grind is. Um, Now, with your podcast and what you guys are doing, Nathan, I just wanted to ask, bro, what's what are the plans for Rugby League Guru? Where do you see yourself in say 5 years from now? Is it podcasting, or you want to move outside of that? Like you're wearing merch, that's another avenue that comes along with what you see a lot with podcasting now. Uh, what's um, what's the future holding for Rugby League Guru, or the end game even?
To be honest with you, mate, it's quite a daunting question because where I am now is probably never where I thought I'd be,
Yeah,
and it's all just taken off so quickly. It's wild to even try and consider what's to happen over the next few years. Like obviously Kempy's brought me on, Bloke In A Bar, and now that I'm part of that team, like it pretty much already is like the biggest sporting podcast in the country. But like
no doubt.
I just think with Kempy's mind and allowing me to be part of that, I just think that show. I hope that one day, and it's crazy to think this, it's a real pinch myself sort of moment, but like I grew up with the footy show.
Yeah,
That was my thing growing up. I'm sure it was your thing growing up as well.
Yeah,
You grew
yeah,
up with the footy show because TV was our main thing then. Yeah, you weren't listening to podcasts. You weren't like that was it. YouTube wasn't around, none of that. So that would be your thing. And it's crazy to think now that, I've got kids that I coach in footy who listen to Bloke in a Bar every single episode, every single week. And it's wild to think that, like, I'll sort of be that guy that they're listening to,
yeah,
that they're watching every single week. And like it's wild. I was, and it's the first time it's ever happened to me. I was walking around in the city about 6 weeks ago, and I literally ran into someone wearing, just randomly, a Guru t-shirt. And bro, it's one of the best feelings of my life. And I'm not moving big merch. Everyone thinks with podcasts, you sell thousands of shirts. If you sell 60, you've done incredibly well. It's so much harder than what it seems. And that's another thing that Denon's done that I think people underappreciate how well he does his merchandise. Because at the end of the day, it's a t-shirt that says bloke.
yeah,
Yeah, it hasn't reinvented the wheel in any way, shape, or form, but it's what bloke stands for, and it's what bloke has meant to people for years on years on years on years. So for me to be walking around the streets of the city and see a guy wearing a Guru hat and he see me coming and us just sort of go, oh, how good's this sort of thing? That was like an unbelievable moment for me. That probably doesn't seem like much to people, but to see your brand just in the public when it's not someone you know, it's not a friend, it's not a family member or anything, that was unreal. So like merchandise will always be a part of it. I don't know if I'm ever going to have a big enough market to survive off merchandise. Realistically, I honestly just get a thrill out of knowing that people are willing to spend money to wear Guru
yeah.
stuff. I think that's unreal. I think podcasting will always be part of my life. I'd like to think so, and I'd just like to think that if I'm able to stay with Bloke, for as long as I can, because there will come a point where there'll be a younger guy of me that is doing something over the next few years that'll every show has to change and adapt over years, and I'll have to do the same thing with Rugby League Guru as well, bring on other people and bring on fresh talent and everything. So I think that's going to be the next 10 years or so when I'm going to sort of do what Kempy's done. And, he had a look around and he chose me and brought me on board. And I'm looking forward to that challenge over the next few years, having to bring other people on board. I'd like to think in the next year or two, I'd have my own space, my own studio instead of the spare room in our unit, which has been great. But I'd like to think I'd have my own space. So yeah, mate, I just think that the platform's been laid by Kempy that you can do that. Kempy, your YKTRs, these sort of guys that, and I just think that with every year podcasts get more popular. And I really do think we're scratching the surface with podcasts. The amount of people I still talk to have got no idea what they are is unbelievable. YouTube as well. Like you look at that, this next generation coming through, like none of my mates have YouTube accounts, none of them, because we didn't grow up on it. But this next generation, they all have YouTube accounts. It's crazy. Like I coached a under 16 team 2 years ago, and I've told this story a few times. I had them all sitting there, and I said, who has TikTok? 30 hands went up. I said, okay. Who has Instagram? 15 hands went up. I said, who has Facebook? Not a single hand went up. And Facebook, like I still talk to my mates over Facebook Messenger. That's our number one spot to talk. But that's going to become obsolete very, very soon.
It's so funny you say that because, yeah, I feel the same way. I've grown up with Facebook as my go-to social media, but it's Instagram and TikTok that's taken over everything. Twitter, not so much. I guess Twitter's not something that's really that big on this side of the world. But yeah, Facebook, man, that's my go-to as well. Messenger, everything.
Yeah.
My sharing content. Now, Nathan, I just wanted to ask, you mentioned Den and Kemp, and we've been talking about Bloke in a Bar. I just wanted to ask, what's the biggest impact Denon's had on you since you've joined Bloke in a Bar and had a chance to learn from him in this podcasting space? What's the biggest impact he's had on your podcast or on your life in general?
Kempy's a really interesting guy because, you see the guy on camera who, he talks so much and he's so animated and everything. And when you get to know Kemby, he is a little bit different to that character that you see, and he's very good at. He's one of those guys that if something needs to be said in 3 words, he'll say it in 3. He won't say it in 10. And then he'll never there's been moments where I think, oh, he's going to pull me up and tell me to change something about what I said or whatever. And he never really does that, but he's always teaching me things in little subtle ways. And mate, as I said to you off the top, I don't know if he's doing it on purpose or not, but I'm always just picking up little things. And mate, to be perfectly honest with you, the best thing Kempy's done for me is give me the confidence to do what I do. Because as I said before, Kempy, when he was looking for a co-host, he could have reached out to any of the 1,000 former first graders like Channel 9 or Fox would have done and gone and got one of them. And he rang me instead. So that has filled me with so much confidence. And he's never. I think when I first came on, he said it to me, but he's never really said it to me since. He just sort of said, "Oh, I respect your opinion. You know what you're talking about. Just believe in what you think because you know what you're doing."
Yeah,
and that's been huge. That's been especially for me. And as I told you, I made my page Rugby League Guru because I saw that guy in the fantasy sports and I just copied that. And then it just rolled, the momentum kept rolling. And I think people, I come into, conversation, whatever, and people go, oh, bloke calls himself a guru. He's a fucking egomaniac. And it's so far from the truth. It's not even funny. It's just that I came up with this name at the start and then it started to roll.
Yeah. You've stuck with it.
And then, I mean, it's an effective business now. So it's not like I can go back and change it. And look, I wouldn't change it, to be honest with you, but I'm not as I said to you, I can't remember if it was on camera or off camera, but you said to me, oh, do I call you Guru or Nathan? And whenever my mates know if they want to G me up, they call me Guru in public. And they know that shits me to tears, which is what mates are meant to do. But it is interesting, I guess, and I get it why how people look at me and go, fuck, this guy calls himself the guru. He's so full of himself. He thinks he knows it all, which it just isn't the reality.
Yeah. No, that's it's a weird concept. Once you make it and people who know your brand, they think that's how you are or think like that. But that's awesome that you can, that you're a totally separate person from what you portray through the podcast on YouTube there. Now, Nathan, let's step aside from the podcasting and stuff of that nature, which is awesome, and thank you for sharing. But like you said, your mates G you up when they call you Guru. So I just wanted to ask a few things footy related now, just to test the Guru or just to test out the almanac here. But bro, here's a question. What dream matchup would you like to see? Any year, any team, from any era. What's a dream footy matchup you would like to see?
Mate, for me, I always narrow it down to a few sides. I think obviously, that early 90s Brisbane Broncos team. I love that team. And, it's weird. Like when I think about my top 3 most entertaining or the sides that I enjoyed to watch the most, it would have been the 90s Broncos and probably the 90s Raiders. And I think that's a pretty common answer that it's terrible that we never got to see them play in a grand final. The other team though, mate, that I think is incredibly slept on, and this current Panthers side, they're starting to head into really, rare territory with what they're doing. To be honest with you, I'm so glad that I'm alive and at the age I am at to watch this Panthers side because I think it's incredible what they're doing. But the 2017 Melbourne Storm team, that's one of my favorite teams ever, and I think it's one of the greatest teams ever. And I think it's sort of it's slept on a little bit because you'll remember they played the Cowboys in the grand final. Yeah. The Cowboys were without Thurston. They'd gone on that incredible run where they just hung in every single game, and then they came up against this Melbourne style and they were just blown off the park in that game. They never stood a chance. But you go back and you have a look at that Melbourne Storm side, like that's Cooper Cronk, that's Cameron Smith, that's Billy Slater, that's Josh Adokar, that's Cameron Munster, that's the Bromwich boy. It was such a stacked team, the 2017 Melbourne Storm side. So they're a team that I would honestly put them up against any team ever. And they'd be really hard not to back in. So as far as dream matchups, I'd put the Broncos and the Raiders from the 90s up against each other, see who came out of that, and then you can play the 2017 Storm.
What's a team that you feel had a chance to be a dynasty? Or I've always said dynasty. I know a lot of Aussies say dynasty, but what's a team that you feel had the potential to be great, but never reached that potential?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, mate. I always go back to the early 2000s Roosters. And you know what? People might say that's unfair because they won in 02. But, mate, you have a look. Like, I honestly think they went 02, 03, 04. They lost in 03. They lost in 04. I would confidently back the 03 and the 04 team to beat the 02 team. Like, those teams were stacked. They lost to Penrith that day. Then they lost to the Canterbury Bulldogs the year after. And, you know, obviously 2002 is one of those years that people look back at it, you know, a bit of an asterisk. The Roosters, they beat the Warriors, but of course the Bulldogs, you know, they were the best team in the comp that year. They had all their points stripped. So, but then you also got to remember with that Roosters team, 2000, they lost the grand final as well. 2001, I think Joey beat them in the prelim or something, or maybe it was the semi-final. 2001 was a bit of a low year for them. But like at the end of that 01 season, they let Graham Murray go. They brought in Ricky Stewart. He changed everything about that footy side. They went to 3 grand finals in a row. So 4 grand finals in 5 years and only having 1 premiership to show. That they're the standout team to me as a side that they should have won a comp somewhere in there. Oh, sorry, to be honest with you, mate, I honestly think they should have won 3 comps in a row there. I really do. I can't believe they lost in 03 and I can't believe they lost in 04. And obviously I'm biased on this one, but it was Brad Fittler's last game.
Yeah.
And I remember being out there and I'm sure you'll remember the try. Brad Fittler gets the ball and he does like this left foot screw kick, kicks it back over the play the ball and it hits Chrissy Walker on the full and he scores. And I remember being there going, that is one of the best kicks you'll ever see in rugby league. That was unbelievable. And I just remember thinking they won't lose this game. And I think they went into halftime up by 7 and then Brent Sherwin and Matt Utai and Hazmel Masri just put on a masterclass in the back end. And it's crazy to look back on that game. I remember with about 10 minutes to go, Canterbury made a substitution and Jonathan Thurston came on. And he came on the field in that game. And if you go back and watch it, it's with about 10 minutes to go. He gets the ball on about his probably on about halfway, and he's coming down a narrow short side. I'll never forget. It was inside the tram line, and he kicked it straight down that corridor, and it found touch about 2 meters out. And I remember looking at my old man and going, "Oh my god, what a kick that was! That was unbelievable." And then, obviously, the next 15 years, he absolutely dominates. He won a year later. He had a Dally M medal. He was playing in a grand final. Those games are unbelievable. So, yes, in answer to your question, I would go to the Roosters from the early 2000s. I also think around that 08, 09, 10, 11, that West Tigers side when Benji was at his absolute best. I think they lost a couple of prelims in a row. South Sydney's probably been the side over the last few years. They've lost more prelim finals and grand finals than it's crazy how many they've lost. So, yeah, they'd probably be my picks for that one, mate. There might be a podcast in that just quietly.
Yeah, there could be. I think there could be. And it's funny you brought up the Roosters 03 Penrith. We were meant to win that game. And then 04, the Doggies. Now, I feel that Doggies team, that's a team that had the chance to be great and make a run for a few premierships. They had such a gun forward pack and their backline wasn't the worst. It wasn't the best, it wasn't the worst, but that forward pack, that was amazing, that forward pack. And
we were talking on Bloke the other day that they, had their points stripped off them in 02. They lost the prelim to the Roosters in 03, which in my opinion is why the Roosters lost the 03 grand final because that Dogs game took so much out of them. They won it in 04, 05. From memory, they completely shit the bed and they missed the finals that year. I think they finished 9th. But then 06, people forget, like Brisbane went on to win that grand final, but in the prelim final, the Bulldogs had them. They were up by like 12 or 14 at halftime, and Willie Mason, famously sort of said, "We're going to another grand final," and Wayne Bennett just went, "Did you hear that?" Like if that would have played out a little bit differently. It's crazy how much success that Canterbury and those Roosters teams could have had in
Yeah.
that early period.
Yep. Um, Now, bro, I just wanted to go down to the grassroots level.
Mm.
What are your thoughts on the current state of grassroots rugby league? Is it in a healthy position at the moment? Because I sort of feel, even based up here in Brisbane, it's going okay, but outside of places like Penrith, you hear about the numbers, the kids that are registered to play footy have been dwindling over the years. I'm not sure if it's too true, if that's true, but what are your thoughts on grassroots rugby league, and is it in a healthy position at the moment?
Mate, it's hard for me to comment because I'm pretty heavily involved with, like I've coached in the grassroots around my area in South Sydney, and I've been really concerned about it around here for a long time. I coached the under 16s, the under 17s they were last year, and we had to combine the South Sydney comp with the Cronulla comp, with the North Sydney comp. And you got to remember the South Sydney comp is already combined with the East comp. So you're essentially, and we also had to combine with the West Tigers comp. So just to make one competition in the under 16s, we had to combine 5 different districts.
It's crazy.
So it's and it was still a 10-team comp. Like it wasn't huge because there's just so few 16-year-old kids that are playing rugby league. And and it's hard because it's hard to get the kid that just loves the game to come and play that probably doesn't have a future in it, because the reality is that so many of these teams, they've got kids that are playing Harold Matts and SG ball, and they're forced to go back and play club footy. So, the smaller kids that aren't going to have a career in it, they're just getting dominated. It's and I always say, and I think sometimes NRL, like we take the piss out of the AFL and we do all that, but right, as a teacher, I'll never forget. I always use this story. We had the Swans come to our school one day. Unbelievable. Every kid got a hat. Every kid got a football. It was interactive. It was like they'd obviously sat down and planned out, how do we try and get these kids' attention, and they nailed it. An NRL team, I won't say which one, an NRL team came a few weeks later, and they showed up with a PowerPoint, and every kid got a bag which had a rubber and a tube of toothpaste in it.
Wow.
I just sat there and went, what are we doing? Like we've had the wood over the AFL for a long time, and I think that sometimes we relax a little bit too much on that, thinking we'll always have it. We take it for granted. I don't know what it's like up your way, mate, but you drive around Sydney now. There's more AFL posts around than ever. There's more soccer posts around than ever. I remember as a kid, like we used to, like when I was real young, we used to drive up to like Lismore, sort of north New South Wales sort of area at the end of every year for a holiday up that way to a beach nearby. And I remember like Dad used to always take me through. We used to always go through the country towns and whatnot. And he'd say, "Oh, that's this oval, that's this oval." And mate, I have no recollection of ever seeing an AFL post or a soccer field the whole way up that coastline.
Yeah.
Do it now, and they're everywhere.
Wow.
They are everywhere. You drive down to like Endeavour Sports. There's AFL posts there now. Like I sometimes I really worry that we're sleeping on. We're just we're just relying on what's worked in the past. And
Yeah.
I think that, and and I've spoken to junior development coaches, within the South Sydney comp, and they go, it's what happens. Kids take school more serious. They do this, and I'm like, you've got 2 South Sydney teams in the under 16s. How on earth, out of the entire South Sydney region of 16-year-olds, is there 35 kids that want to play rugby league? How is that not a problem?
Yeah, that's a massive problem. And it's crazy because I think viewership, TV viewership for the NRL they had actually beaten the AFL last year, I think it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought I'd ask and just see what your thoughts were, because I think rugby union is a great lesson for rugby league to learn from, especially at grassroots.
Rugby union is the best lesson we could possibly have, and all we do is take the piss out of it and ignore it.
Yeah. Yeah, so interesting times for grassroots level rugby league, anyways. Hopefully, they do something about it. Now, I wanted to also ask Nathan your thoughts on the the player base. So a lot of the players in the NRL, well, at the moment, you sort of see it's like 50-50. There's Polynesians and Māori, and then there's the rest. Do you think it will ever become a reality where it could be 90% Polynesians in the NRL?
I think without a doubt. I think definitely, mate. I think that I don't have the numbers in front of me, and I don't know if you've researched them or not. But to be honest with you, mate, I'd be a little bit surprised if it was still 50-50. And all you have to do is go to a junior football game, and you can see that it is changing 100%. And I definitely think that it's going to be a pathway that we're going to see in the NRL very, very soon. And, like if you go back and you have a look at Bloke In A Bar this week, we went through the 2006 Broncos. You go back to that side from memory, like there wasn't a single Polynesian player in that team, I don't think. A couple of Indigenous boys, but I don't think there was any Polynesian players in that side. And now you get to, the teams nowadays, like if you don't have any Polynesian players, you're not going to be successful. There's certain things that Polynesian boys can do that Aussie boys can't. And I think with a lot of teams, you've got to find a real mix of cultures in your side. And I think it's one thing that we sleep on that the Melbourne Storm always do really well. They've always got a couple of Aussie boys, and they've got a few Indigenous boys, and there's Polynesian boys coming through. There's a heap of Kiwis that are always there. I think the Melbourne Storm are really good at finding that balance. The Penrith Panthers are the same, mate. Have a look at the Panthers side. Like so many different cultures in there, and I think it's so important. It's so crucial to your side to be able to get a real mix of cultures that all bring a different skill set.
Yeah.
But yeah, mate, I do think, and I especially think, it's been the thing for years where, you'd get your Tonga, your Samoas, these sort of sides that arrive at a World Cup, and you'd go, fuck, look at this side, they're so good, but they don't have a 7, they don't have a 6, they don't have a 9. And that was the argument every single year. You're seeing that change now. You're seeing that change 100%. And I reckon the kid that's going to really turn it is this Isaiah Katoa up at the Dolphins. I'm very, very high on him. And I also think, a guy like Jerome Luai, like, has he got his, Magoo moments in him? 100% he does. But people that want to act like he isn't a supremely talented footballer are absolutely kidding themselves. Like, I don't think that you would have seen guys like Jerome Luai, Isaiah Katoa 10 or 15 years ago. I just don't think you would have seen it in first grade.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing, which I thought I'd ask. Now, Nathan, I just want to jump on something that's always, it seems like every weekend we're always talking about this, and this is the bunker. What are your thoughts on the bunker? Are there things that you feel that they should be or shouldn't be able to rule on, like such as a forward pass? They don't rule on that, but I think they should rule on it. What are your thoughts on the bunker?
Mate, I've always taken a very heavy stance on this, and I don't think people like my opinion on it, but that's fine. Everyone wants technology until they get it. And then the game slows down. Then you stop the momentum. Why are we looking at it in slow motion? We're looking at it in slow motion because you all asked for it. This is what you've all been begging for 10 years, and now you've got it. It's too much. I think people forget that our game existed for 100 years before we brought technology in, and it was unreal. Find me someone who doesn't like the footy in the 80s and the 90s. Yeah. Not going to happen. No way. The game flowed. It moved quickly. I find it absolutely bizarre that every single Monday the NRL does a press conference going through the mistakes that the referees made. I just think it's mistakes are going to happen. It's part of the game. I mean, is there going to come a point where you're going to see NRL teams have a press conference every Monday going through the 2 knock-ons that this player had? Because that player's getting paid 5 times as much as that referee. He's not expected to be perfect, but the referee is. Yeah. I think it is so bizarre. And I've said it for a long time, mate. I think in rugby league, we've got a massive finger-pointing culture. I think that, if a referee makes a decision that we don't agree with in the last 5 minutes, we're going to ignore the 14 mistakes that we've made. And that's the one. That's what cost us. That's why we didn't win this game of football. 35 missed tackles, 19 errors. No, the referee lost it for us. I think it is. I find it so embarrassing sometimes. And even the way that, we see players and everything, the way that they talk to referees as well. That's the one thing, mate. Like, Now, I'm obviously a huge league guy, so I'm not a huge union fan, but mate, the respect that union players have for referees, I
Yeah.
wish we had it, because sometimes it is so embarrassing the way that we treat referees. It is absolutely disgraceful, in my opinion. And, I'm obviously involved with junior grades and whatnot. And for people to say it doesn't filter down, they're kidding themselves. Absolutely kidding themselves. My boys know that when they coach, if they come off the field and they complain about the ref, they wouldn't play next week.
Yeah. That's always been my experience with rugby league as well. I come from a small town back in Wellington, New Zealand, Wainuiomata, and they had a really gun footy team in the 80s and 90s. Um, but they had a tradition of giving it to the ref and the opposition. And then on the other side of the neighborhood, the boys are playing rugby union and they're calling the ref sir and stuff like that, you know. And you see it in union over here, you see it in union even in the pros. Whereas in rugby league, you always see our players mouthing off at the ref. And I think that's something that they've been trying to fix or work on. It's fair game. If they're going to do that, I'm all for the ref sending them off the field for, 10 minutes or whatever it may be. Um, Now, just to wrap it up, and we were talking about this earlier with social media. What's your thoughts on mental health? Well, firstly, we'll touch on the footy players, mental health, and social media. Do you think it's a double-edged sword for like you're talking? There really hasn't been that much content with the boys getting in trouble, which is a good thing. But what are your thoughts on mental health for these footy players and social media? Is it a double-edged sword for these players?
Yeah, for sure, mate. And I think social media in general is a double-edged sword. I remember I said something once to me, and I think you said it on podcast that social media is like a hammer. I think you said you can beat the shit out of someone with a hammer, or you can build a house with it. So there's positives and negatives depending on how you want to use it. I've managed to use my social media, in my opinion, as a positive. But even yesterday, and it was the first time it's happened, very weird timing. I got about 60 DMs from people because someone had made a fake account of Rugby League Guru. So it was Rugby League Guru with a hashtag or something at the end of it. And it was whoever was doing this page was sending people messages saying they had won a prize with a link to click and put in your details, we'll transfer that, all that sort of jazz, and it was just, and I just said to everyone that messaged me, hey, can you just report it? And they went, yeah, sweet. So anyway, I got a notification today saying that it's not a reportable offense. And I thought, how on earth can it not be a reportable offense? And I clicked on the link to the page and they just changed it. They changed it completely to some other, it was selling like organic towels. And I was like, what's happened here? And then I typed in the name of that brand and, that was another page with 60 or 70,000. So there's obviously someone out there who's just going day by day, changing the name to be something else and then targeting certain people to try and get a bit of money out of them, to try and cash them out. And it's a classic example of you can use social media in such a negative way. And I think that, and I think this has been something really positive in rugby league. And I think that, people like myself, Denon, Isaac, or like all these people that are doing, your sort of off media or, different, however the hell you want to describe it. I think that we've done really well stamping out people messaging players when their multis lose, that sort of stuff. I just think it's become more of a cultural thing now to just say to you, mate, you're being a dickhead. What are you doing? Mate, it's so disheartening when, you see occasionally a Latrell Mitchell, he's fantastic at it. Latrell Mitchell will post occasionally that someone sent him something incredibly racist that is just unbelievable that someone would type, not only think it, would then type it and then would send it is crazy. But I won't say who, but I've sat, in the studio with another Indigenous player who has showed me their DMs, and mate, there's so many of them. I can't imagine what Latrell Mitchell's would look like for the one that he puts up. I reckon there'd be another 100 out there that he gets. It's just, I can't even fathom it. But then, God rest his soul, Paul Green passes away, and everyone's pro mental health, everything on top of it for a week. We're all in, we love it. And then a week later, so many people are just back out there abusing people online. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I've always said it, and that, without coming back to the referees thing, like, I know for a fact a lot of referees out there that really struggle with mental health. And like, I really hope we don't have a situation like that one day, but with the amount of pressure these guys are under and how much shit they're copying constantly, you think about being a ref, you can have 100 games where you don't make a mistake. And that 101st game where you do, the NRL will sack you.
Yeah.
People will follow you in the street. Like when I was teaching, I taught the daughter of an NRL referee, and like people used to come up to them on the street and abuse him in front of her. She was 6 years old.
Wow.
And it's just like, it's that side of things that just, sometimes it really, really worries me. At the same time, there's so many NRL players out there that if they get on the front foot and they use their social media in a positive way, they can have such a positive impact. And I think players are more and more starting to realize that. I've obviously over the last year or so formed a pretty good relationship with Jackson Hastings, and mate, the amount of stuff that he's copped and some of the DMs that he's shown me on his phone, it is some of the things that people say to guys they don't know the first thing about, that they're just going off articles or stories they've heard or anything, is unbelievable. And I think Jacko is a guy that, a few years ago when no one wanted him in the NRL and he had to go to Salford, he got on the plane, didn't know where Salford was, had no idea, but he had no choices anymore. And this was 3 years before that. He was the best young player in the country.
Yeah.
And for him to just, he like the mental health demons that he had to deal with over there, completely rebuild himself as a person, then come back over here, and then people still judging him like he's a complete and utter, just treating him like he is still a teenager. That, and Jackson will be the first one to say, and this is what I think Jackson did really well. He got on the front foot and said, "Yep, I was a dickhead. I did this wrong. I did this wrong. I did this wrong. I've learned from it. I've grown from it." And thankfully, despite the circus that is the West Tigers, I think people have been able to see the real Jackson Hastings.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think he's made, and I'm like that. That's probably one of the things I'm proudest of, is my little role that I've played in showing what Jackson's really like.
Yeah. Yeah, because when he was on the Bloke In A Bar podcast, man, he seemed like a really neat guy, and man,
He's the best.
great
He's a
insight.
legend.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
And the thing,
wow.
a guy like him, which I think Jackson can start to change things too. Like we were doing a podcast with him at the start of the year, and I'd message him and go, "Hey, bro, I don't know if you're free today, but we're going through our favorite jerseys of all time." And he'd go, "Yeah, Gun, I want to be there. Can you wait an hour so I can come?" Like he's a footy nerd, and I think for a very long time, footballers have been scared to show that side of them because their mates would give him shit. You take it too seriously. You care too much. Jackson is just more than happy to show that he cares too much about rugby league, which I think is a trait that is just so underappreciated.
Yeah, I agree, man. I agree. On a final note, Nathan, can I ask, bro, with your mental health and social media, how do you deal with that, man, when you start getting trolls in your DMs? What coping mechanisms do you use to make sure that you're not affected by that shit?
I'm better at it now than what I used to be. I used to be bad, but I used to clap back at everyone. I used to think, okay, I've got to win this individual battle with this person, And occasionally, I had one today. To be honest with you, I didn't have a great day today. Had a few things go wrong, and I clapped back at someone, and mate, I could tell by their comments they had no idea what they were talking about, no idea whatsoever. But because I wasn't in a great mood for a few hours, I snapped back at someone, and I just trying to win that little alpha moment. And then you sit back there 10 seconds later and you go, what was the point?
Yeah.
Their name on Instagram is JXZ234.
Yeah.
What did I achieve then? You know what I mean? So I used to be, I used to be really bad at it. Like I look back at some of the little things I got into and just cringe at how I carried on, sort of thing. But yeah, I think, mate, it's hard. I've always said to my mates, like I've had a few mates who said, "Oh, I'm going to try and do a social media thing," and I go, "Yeah, sweet, but just be prepared. Like, no matter what you do, you're going to cop crap for it. People are going to come after you. They're going to get stuck into you. They're going to, I had a post the other day, and I knew when I uploaded, as soon as I uploaded, I saw that I got one. It was a 250 word post, and I got one letter wrong. I think instead of field, I wrote FIEKD. K is directly next to L. And I saw it and thought, oh, here we go. Everything I wrote in this post isn't going to matter because all people are going to say is a K anyway. So I made sure I was the first comment. As soon as it went up, I wrote FIELD, ha ha. What a dickhead, can't even spell. By the time I submitted that, there was 6 other comments pointing out that there was one letter wrong in that post. And that is social media down to a T.
Yeah.
And it used to be back in the day, there'd be 20 of those comments. There'd be a heap of them. Now you get 5 or 6, but then people will comment underneath that going, yeah, good on you, mate.
Yeah.
Like,
you dickhead.
You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's where part of that culture is changing. But now I get comments every day that are, disagreeing with what I say and or like giving me shit or like making a personal attack on me and whatever. And you just gotta sit there and go, fuck. If I was sitting there writing comments like that to someone I've never met before who's literally doing their job, what sort of a headspace am I in?
Yeah, that's true.
And you just got to think, fuck, if that person needs to have that shot at me today to obviously for them to get something out of it, they probably need it.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, which is sad and it's dreadful to think about, mate. But I just, and obviously it's different because I'm in the content space, but like I can't imagine any of my mates sitting there on their phone abusing someone that all they're doing is putting out content for. If you don't want to watch it, move on.
Yeah, so true, man. And when you imagine if you were still clapping back and the amount of hours you would have been wasting doing all that.
That's what I was doing. I was clapping back at everything. And, it's so funny how, Kempy very rarely does it. I very rarely do it now, but we were willing to clap back at each other.
Yeah.
Which is wild to think about, like just crazy. But like, mate, like some of the things that and it's hard because like it happens every single Monday on the podcast, every single time. Someone will like comment on something and they'll just assume a narrative, which isn't what we've said.
Yeah.
So like, for example, the Brisbane Broncos, there's been a lot to talk about with the Brisbane Broncos over the last 2 years. They've got a spoon, players have left, Adam Reynolds arrived, Kevin Walt. Like there's been so much to talk about. So every week we will talk for the Broncos. Not every week, but quite often we will talk about the Broncos a little bit longer than probably the other teams. And the first comment will be, it's Kempy talking about the Broncos and how it's all okay once again, when the reality is the entire episode is the complete opposite to that. It's Kempy being raw and honest about how disappointed he is with what's happening at the Broncos. But if you're not going to sit there and watch the whole 4 hours and you read that comment, most people will just believe that.
Yeah.
And then you start to build a narrative through comments and everything. And that sort of stuff becomes frustrating when you put so much work into your content and then a couple of comments are just sitting there and it gives people the wrong idea of what's actually happening. Like the amount of people that will, mate, it's crazy. Like the amount of times I'll put out a piece of content and I'll get a message going, I hate you. You sit on the fence. You never make a decision. I'm like, I'll open the next DM and it'll go, you're too negative. Why don't you ever say anything positive? And it's like, hold on. Am I sitting on the fence or am I being too negative? And then there'll be messages, you're too positive. You're just pro player. And it's like, I can honestly get those 3 messages within 2 hours.
Wow.
You just can't win.
Yeah. I was just going to say that you can't win, eh? You can't
win at all.
I guess the biggest take is to just ignore the noise, eh?
Oh, mate, 100%. And it's, you've just got to ignore it. You just got to get on with what you're doing. And mate, at the same time, I make it sound like it's all doom and gloom. I will receive so many messages that are people saying how much they appreciate, how much they love. But at the end of the day, you're a human being and that stuff's nice. But, if someone says something mean to you and someone says something nice to you, what are you going to remember?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's the same every single time. And I don't know why humans are like that. I'd love to be able to change that within myself. But I think most people are the same. If you hear something negative, and it's wild, like if I was walking down the street and someone's called out something, I'd be like, what's that guy's problem? And it wouldn't upset me at all. But on social media, I don't know. It just feels a bit different, I guess. Maybe it's a bit more personal.
Good thing.
Yeah, it's wild.
Some days you're just like, fuck it. I'm going to clap back and give it to this guy as well. But I know what you mean, bro. It's a weird concept. But it's a tricky thing, mental health, and especially how it's always talked about now. And I thought I'll just ask and see what your thoughts were on it. But Nathan, man, thank you so much for your time. I just wanted to ask, where can my listeners, if I have any, where can they find you on the socials?
Yeah, mate. Rugby League Guru podcast. People can listen to all my stuff there on the Bloke In A Bar podcast as well. Always plenty of content coming out there. YouTube this year, as I mentioned, mate, we're going pretty hard at that. So Rugby League Guru YouTube, and then Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, everywhere you'll find any form of social media, I'll be there. And then whatever's going to be the next thing over the next 10 years that I'll battle to understand, I'll be there as well, mate.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nathan, for your time, bro. It means a lot, man. I'm a no-name fucking podcaster, and I've just started, and here you are giving me a shot. So thanks for that. I was nervous as hell, like I told you at the beginning. Shitting bricks, actually. But
You're good at it, man.
It's
Good.
Thanks, bro. It's been a
Like
pleasure.
I legitimately mean that. Yeah, you're good at keeping conversation flowing and stuff, which I think people underappreciate how hard it is with podcasting. Sometimes I've got a mate, he loves his super coach and all that, and he's always, there was times there where like he'd tell me what I said wrong or this or that, and then I got him on the podcast once. We got about 5 minutes into it, and he went, "Bro, I can't do this. I just can't do it." People don't realize how hard it is.
Yeah, it is hard. It's not easy, but it's something I want to do, and just that advice that you had for listeners out there that want to get into it, something I'm going to take on board. Just grinding away and just keeping at it. But bro, thank you so much, man. Means a lot. Can't wait to watch. I actually haven't watched the episode you guys dropped last night on Bloke In A Bar, so I'll get into that and keep following all your content. But thank you so much for your time tonight, bro. It's been a pleasure, and all the best with Rugby League Guru. But more importantly, all the best with the wedding, bro. The wedding.
Yeah, that's the big one, mate.
Yeah, that's the big one. Are you getting married in Australia or overseas?
Yeah, no. I get married in Australia. We're actually get married in a nice little spot about 4 or 5 streets away. So all pretty close to home.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, it's unreal. It's going to be gun. So yeah, it's going to be great. And yeah, thanks for having me on, mate. And if you ever need anything or anything, reach out. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, bro. Well, that's the end of our episode here on Let's Talk with Winny Vee. This is my special guest, Nathan Durkin, aka Rugby League Guru, and I signing off. Everyone stay safe, and thanks for listening.